Thank you so much for joining me on your AI CMO. I am so thrilled today to have Cassidy Reid joining me. She is an expert in AI automation. And what I'm finding as the founder of Wit Omni AI Marketing, which is an AI marketing agency where I serve as fractional CMO and strategic advisor to a number of companies, is that AI transformation, we're at the beginning stages right now. Cassidy's going to give us some really actionable tips so you can ensure that your AI transformation goes a bit more smoothly. So with that, welcome, Cassidy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you working on and what gets you excited?
So I'm currently serving as the strategic program manager for CAI, where I am responsible for the AI, machine learning, and digital twin initiatives. My focus is really on helping companies not just adopt emerging technologies, but actually operationalize them in a way that's sustainable, compliant, and tied to real business value, I'd say, at the end of the day. So I'm also the founder of Women in Automation, a nonprofit community working on to create more access and opportunity and representation for women in the automation and AI space. But what excites me the most in seeing these tools, AI, automation, digital twins, not as an abstract trends, but as real enablers of progress when they're implemented thoughtfully and inclusive, more power to reshape how people work and how decisions are made and ultimately how we serve others.
Excellent. And that's where I first met you. We recently had a chance to meet face to face during a breakfast that you co hosted with Women X AI. And I'm so excited because Jenny K. Pollock, who's the founder of that organization, was just on a recording yesterday. So I'm really thrilled that we can have you on. So tell us about your journey and how did you get to where you are today, the shortcut version, and give our listeners some advice. Is there a key gem that you learned along the way in your journey?
Of course, my path has been anything but linear. I started in the digital marketing and analytics space, which gave me an understanding of how powerful data could be shaping our strategy. But over time, I became more curious about the back end processes, the engines, that power these businesses. And that curiosity led me to intelligent automation consulting and eventually into leadership roles where I was designing and implementing global transformation programs. And through that journey, I really saw a major gap where these projects were deeply technical, but they required a human element and alignment to succeed. And that's what inspired me to start Women in Automation, is really to create a space for more voices, more connection, and more impact. My biggest piece of advice, though, going back to that, was really to stay relentlessly curious. I know everyone says that, but I think it's extremely important. You don't have to be the most technical person in the room, but you do have to care enough to ask the right questions.
I love that advice. And honestly, even for myself, that is what I did when I left my corporate role. And that was when Gen AI was really just on its upswing with ChatGPT and people were starting to discover it. Is the curiosity factor was reinvigorating for me. After having served in house for so many years as a marketing exec, you kind of get used to really, learning operations and, using data to optimize. And it's kind of the same thing a little bit over and over and over because it's a system that you're really trying to implement. But with AI, I feel like, especially if you're in marketing like myself, but I think in a lot of industries, it's almost like we get to rediscover the joy of doing it in a very different way that is mind blowing. So I think it's pretty exciting. And the relentless curiosity, I think that's the only way to be if you're going to succeed in today's environment. All right. With that, let's get on to the AI CMO 9. With this, I'm going to ask you 9 questions in a very action driven format because I really think it's important that our listeners get actionable advice. That's the kind of marketer I am, and I want to be able to implement strategies. So let's jump to the first question. What does AI transformation actually mean in a business context? And let's cut through the buzzwords. Please help us define it clearly and explain why it is so critical right now.
Yes. AI transformation means using AI intentionally to solve real high value problems, not just experimenting for the sake of it. It's the process of aligning AI capabilities with strategic goals and embedding them into the day to day operations in a way that improves outcomes. So I think so frequently I come across where AI is so sexy right now, right? And everyone just wants to implement it for the sake of implementing it a lot of times, where realistically we need to be going back to where, you know, where are actual pain points in the organization and what's truly going to move the needle, and then finding the AI that will help with that issue, not the other way around. So at CAI, where, we think of AI transformation as both a mindset and a muscle. It's not just about implementing tools, it's about changing how decisions are made, how problems are identified, and how people work together. If the end goal isn't measurable business value, I cannot stress this enough, it's probably not a good transformation. It's a pilot, if that.
I think that's an excellent thing to point out because it isn't if you so what I see happening is it being implemented kind of piecemeal. And when you do that, it becomes really difficult to demonstrate ROI because it just becomes part of the day job and you're not really able to demonstrate the value of AI in something where, for example, it might be easier to implement. So let's just take, because I'm a marketer, I'll talk about this. you know Everyone knows that using AI to generate content, you can generate so much more content than you were able to in the past. But if you just go do it and you're not able to document it and show the time savings, the money savings, then it just becomes part of just something you do, and you can't really use that knowledge to demonstrate why you need to reallocate budget or go to another initiative. It just becomes something that you're just naturally supposed to do. If you are able to document and say, "Hey, look, I implemented AI for this particular project. It saved me X amount of days, weeks, months, this much money. Wouldn't it be great to also deploy AI in this other project where it might not be as easy to implement? You may need buy-in, you may need another AI tool." So, being a little bit thoughtful up front, as if this is a new technology, new methodology you're bringing, the same way you would that, maybe something that doesn't have so much excitement around it, you would document it, right? And you would show the ROI. I think it's really critical to be able to do that.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Pallavi. It's really, I was speaking to African women in STEM. I was on their podcast with Adeze, their founder, a few days ago, and we talked about how AI projects need to be looked at as less as a technical project, but more of a change management project at the end of the day, right? It's really how it's impacting humans, it's impacting your workforce and how you're working together because AI is an enabler. It's not a solve all, right? So yeah, I couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So the next one, what are the first three steps a company should take when building an AI transformation plan? We want listeners to start from zero. What step one, two, three, as we just talked about? We don't want it to be this piecemeal implementation. So how do you recommend companies approach it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've thought about this a bit. So I'd say step one is define a real business problem that's causing friction or a missed opportunity. Start with a pain, not platforms. Finding that problem that's costing your organization time, effort, and money and quality, that's your anchor. And then, really, step two would be evaluate your data and your technology readiness. I just came back from Snowflake Summit last week in San Francisco, where I had the opportunity to meet you. But it's really about assessing your data maturity because your AI is only going to be as good as your data, right? At the end of the day, the two of them so closely go together. So making sure that you have access to the right data, is it clean enough to drive decisions? And that step often gets skipped, to be honest with you. And I'd say, step three, to me, all of these steps kind of almost go together in a lot of ways. But step three, get cross buy-in from both your business and technical leaders. You really need that sponsorship at the end of the day, or it won't move forward or progress in the right way. This means both the technical and business leaders are aligned on why this matters to the organization. When I work with clients, I always say AI success isn't about technical feasibility, it's about organizational alignment.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm going to just do a little add-on question to you that is a little controversial. If you're at a company right now and you're seeing that movement is just not happening, do you think that's a huge red flag for someone to really think about in terms of their career and the future of how long they may want to stay at a company that isn't taking it seriously?
I think that's a very fair call out. and it's something that needs to be strongly considered, and something that should be asked in their interview questions, up front of where do we see this company going? Where do we see this organization trending? Because if they aren't partnering with technology hand in hand, or they don't see it being a part of their future, that might not be a good long term of an organization, right? Because I think, nowadays we're just seeing we need to be incorporating AI and this technology in order to better our services to our clients, in order to become more efficient internally. So if a company isn't aligned digitally to what the future needs are, then I don't think to your point, it might not be a good long term solution or long term career path.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that you should be very shrewd about moving forward. So, number three, how do you assess if your organization is ready for AI and automation, and what signs or indicators show, whether it's a time to move or pause?
I'd say readiness is not just about infrastructure, it's about intent. Some key indicators I personally look for is, do you have clearly defined goals? Do your teams have basic understanding of what AI can and can't do? Is leadership open to uh, iterations? And culturally, people are empowered to test, learn, and even fail because AI transformation isn't linear. It really isn't. It's experimental.
If they don't embrace the reality that there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainty, and we don't have all the answers, and that's why this becomes a very kind of tricky situation, because the company and leadership do need to be willing to take some risks to really figure out how their AI transformation, AI journey is going to work for them when it comes to things like data privacy. Are there use cases where privacy isn't as important and you can use the tools that are out there? And then maybe other cases where privacy does matter. So you need to think through, the safeguards. And as you said earlier, if it's a use case where the AI is going to need a lot of company data, and the data is not, really in shape to be fed into those systems. So these are all, I think, very different initiatives that companies need to look at. And there may be a different pace of evolution of AI adoption by department. All right. So, number four, what's one mistake companies often make early on, and how can they avoid it? So, give a specific example of, if possible, on what to do differently. And, to clarify this means like on their AI journey, what are some mistakes that you've seen made that companies might be able to avoid?
Yeah, I think I've seen this, so I have about a decade experience in strategic AI, and this is something I've come across numerous times. And I think I kind of lightly touched on it in some earlier questions, but really the biggest trap I start seeing with technology is, let's use ChatGPT or computer vision or OCR before understanding what the problem is they're trying to solve in the first place. So I've worked with a client once who heavily invested in conversational AI platform, but they hadn't defined the proper use case for it or really fully vetted it, built it out. And the result was a beautiful, amazing tool that no one used. What a waste of money. Really, to avoid that and reverse the approach, define your desired outcome first, and then find the simplest, smartest solution to get you there, even if it's not AI. And you know what? It doesn't have to be AI. It really doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, there may be certain areas where that isn't the solution, and to rush to do things because this is almost going the other extreme, where you haven't really defined the business use case or value, and you're just rushing to implement it because it's there. That can lead to kind of a disastrous outcomes. Okay, number five. How do you prioritize where to apply AI and automation first? And is it by department, process type, ROI potential, or something else?
This is such a great question. And to me, I hate to be a consultant about this. It depends. It depends on the organization to an extent, right? You want to start where you can build credibility and momentum in an organization. For most organizations, that means looking for processes that are high volume, rules based, time consuming, and measurable. I often use the value versus effort matrix with clients to map out where we'll get the most return and the least resistance. Start with those quick wins per se, and they create a great foundation that allows trust, and for you to take on bigger, more strategic use cases down the line. Now that I know, that's easier said than done for, some of these organizations. I'd say for anything Fortune 1000, Fortune 500, they've been playing in this space, right, for the past decade. So they're out of the quick wins. There are no more quick wins. They are strictly focused on that strategic. So, with that, it's really about, looking at truly what's going to be moving the needle in their organization at that point moving forward.
Yeah, and on the enterprise side, because I know that's a space that you work in predominantly, the enterprise side, the issue seems to be, again, that inertia internally, because there are so many layers of command, so many considerations, greater privacy concerns, all around greater risk. And so, I would imagine that those are use cases where the concept of the pilot is so critical, is to really take something very specific where you can roll it out, measure it, show positive ROI and results. And, the reality is AI is still evolving. We're still in the infancy of generative AI. And I think that people need to understand that and be realistic about what it can do. When we're talking pilots, for example, let's say you do a pilot on some fringe use case and it doesn't work out, so you just trash it. That would be a huge miss because the technology is still evolving. So, it isn't really that hard to figure out what are the good use cases where AI could bring value, deploy those in your company, and wait for the technology to mature in some of those more complex use cases. Because oftentimes, there are still issues with hallucinations and incorrect information. And so you want to make sure that you're not deploying it in a case where you're going to get egg on your face at the end because it didn't work out. And, I was talking with Jenny about this yesterday as well, is that the tools are evolving. And so we might test a tool today that really, is kind of marketed in a way where it sounds like a holy grail tool, but you'll go use it and the output won't be as glorious as you had hoped. And then I like to sometimes go back a couple of months later and I'll notice that they made tremendous strides in the output and it's changed. So we all have to look at things, and I think you said this earlier, we have to look at this whole landscape very differently from anything we've seen in the past and be willing to be a little more patient about the outcome and the evolution and take value, where we can versus kind of taking a negative attitude if it doesn't get us 100% of the way there. And I think that's another important point people need to understand is the technology isn't about getting you 100% of the way there. It's getting you 70 to 90% of the way there, faster, better, cheaper. And then, there is another part that you're going to have to do that won't involve AI to really make sure it succeeds.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so number 6, what should a solid AI transformation plan include? What are the must-haves? So please, for our listeners, break down the key components or categories a business plan must address when you're creating an AI transformation plan.
Yeah, of course. I mean, any strong plan should be including, a clear link to business goals, data governance strategy, a change management and communication strategy with adoption, defined KPIs and success metrics, and a roadmap that balances those quick wins with long term vision, right? One thing I stress with clients is build flexibility into your plans. AI will evolve faster than your governance policy. It should evolve too.
Yeah.
So we can, set up as what we think it looks like as of right now, but it will be changing over time. And so just to keep that in mind.
I think that's such a key point because it feels like you could use the same blueprint that we've been using in business for so many years when it comes to any kind of transformation project. The only difference here is there has to be that caveat that this technology is so rapidly evolving that this isn't the kind of plan that you spend 8 months creating and then deploy it and revisit it in 5 months. It's almost like you have to be constantly reevaluating the plan and adapting to the technology changes because it is just so rapid. So somehow that has to be baked in to the plan and the expectations.
Continuous improvement is always, the terminology that's used for development, right? And continuously improving a tool. But I think the same thing goes for your strategy plan, right? It's just you need to continuously improve it, continuously evolve as this technology evolves, as governance policy changes, as policies globally change. We need to make sure that our organization's that flexible in that lane in order to, adopt, properly. So couldn't agree more with you on that.
Exactly. Okay, number 7. What role does leadership and team alignment play in a successful transformation? And how can companies build that alignment practically? And this is a really important question because, as we all know, when um, these LLMs first came out, what was happening is a lot of employees would just get frustrated and use them in secret almost. And they didn't want to be told, no, you can't use it. So they would just go off and do their own thing. And actually had another guest on. We were talking about it, about this concept of what would happen then is you would get these siloed uses, data silos, as you had, for example, like some knowledge being generated, through those interactions with AI. And so it's really important that leadership not bury their head in the sand about this and make it a priority. So what's your take on that? What's leadership's role to make sure it's successful?
So critical. And I feel like you lightly touched on it earlier in our conversation here. Leadership alignment is the difference between a successful rollout and a stalled initiative at the end of the day. So you need more than approval, you need advocacy. Leaders should be visible and, supporting the initiative, reinforcing the why behind it, and creating a space for teams to adapt. So, one thing I've learned is when people understand the why something is changing and how it benefits them, they're far more likely to lean in. And that's where transformation truly begins. You can't leave people in this black box. You need to, practice transparency in your organization. And I think there will be a lot more buy-in and understanding.
Yeah, and I just had a conversation with a leader about this, and the reality is that it isn't that every single employee is on board and wanting to use it. There are shades where there might be some employees that are very, very eager. Find them, make them your champions, involve them in the more formal rollout of the process, but you're going to need to acknowledge that there may be some employees that aren't on board. They don't understand it. They don't have that experimentation mindset. And you've got to actually bake that into your plan. How are you going to deal with the employees that are resistant to learning this new technology, don't believe in it, are apprehensive about it? Because that also is going to be something you have to grapple with. So I think there are these nuances that when you go to roll this out, that if you think of these things in advance, you're going to be better off. And I think this is where it's really important to align yourself with resources, whether it's hiring a consultant externally or looking to publications, podcasts, whatever it may be, where there are people out there that are immersed in these questions that are coming up. So your company is lucky to have somebody like you who's immersed and thinking about it, and they have the foresight to bring somebody like you on. Many companies are just trying to do with what they have in house already. And those aren't AI experts necessarily. So, that part becomes, I think, really important for leadership to just acknowledge and make sure that if they don't have the right expertise in house, they go and figure out a way to get it. So, number 8, why does inclusion matter in AI and automation, and how can leaders build more inclusive transformational strategies? Let's move this kind of from the concept to practical action. Both you and I have been really involved with ensuring women's voices are heard in this space. So let's talk about what it looks practically to make sure there's a kind of an inclusive angle to the AI transformation journey.
Yeah, of course. So naturally, as the founder of Women in Automation, this is my favorite question. Really, inclusion isn't a box to check, it's a design principle. When diverse voices are part of building AI systems, you catch biases early on. You solve problems more holistically and you create solutions that work for more people. At Women in Automation, we talk a lot about proximity, and inclusion starts with proximity to people whose lived experiences are different than yours. And leaders can build inclusivity by diversifying who's at the table, especially during discovery and design phase. I think that's the most crucial time to make sure that you have the most diverse team as possible, and making sure all of those voices are heard and valued at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I think, really important because there are, when we're talking about inclusivity, we're talking about all facets of inclusivity, and we could even go beyond women and people of color and in those areas where I know you and I spend a lot of our time. But I was thinking about something I recently heard at an AI Leaders Club event that I went to, where the speaker said that the coding language of AI is English. And so basically, if you can English, you can code and you can create. I have a microbiology degree, so I started out in a completely unrelated field to AI in my career and actually did a stint as a technical writer. And I kept thinking is what I learned in technical writing is just how to communicate very methodically. And that's where I think if you have communications people on your team, really those people, especially if you're at a tech company where you have technical writer experts, these people, the way they think very methodically about communicating your technology are invaluable when it comes to AI and prompt engineering. So you really need to be looking at your workforce very differently and say, okay, what are the skill sets that different people have that maybe in the past we didn't use them in a certain capacity, but now we can and they're very valuable because those skills are needed in AI. So when I'm seeing these kind of mass layoffs happening because AI is going to come take charge, it's just feels so misguided to me because I feel like people are not really taking the time to really think thoughtfully about who are the people internally that could really help grow the companies. And there's just these kind of blanket layoffs, and AI is the scapegoat. And so I'm hoping companies will wise up and be a little bit more methodical before they make those kinds of decisions.
I couldn't agree more with that.
All right, number 9. What's one thing a listener should do this week if they want to start their AI transformation journey? Give us a specific low lift action that could spark meaningful progress and any tips you have for people who might be in the camp where their companies aren't moving as fast as they would like on AI transformation. Give us some very, very kind of low level actionable tips.
Yeah. I've thought about this question, and honestly, it's so dependent on the organization that you're working with. You know your own organization's temperament, what could fly, what could not. But I'd say, start by listening. Set up a 30-minute conversation with a business leader in your organization. Ask them what's the most manual, frustrating, or broken process that your teams are dealing with every week. And that's really where transformation is going to begin. You may already have that in mind, but I think building up that business case, understanding from a quantitative perspective, hey, this is what AI can do. It's actually going to free up this amount of time for our employees to start working on more value add, more strategic initiatives rather than, mundane and administrative activities and transactional activities. So, I'd say at the end of the day, you really don't need a multi-million dollar budget or a 3-year roadmap to get started. You really need just one pain point and a willingness to explore. And that's where the transformation is going to begin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such great advice because boiling the ocean for anything never works. And there's plenty of areas where AI can very quickly help where there aren't privacy concerns and data concerns, identify them and be the champion in your company. And you may have to, manage up with this initiative, but it'll be well worth it. And I think it's really great career advice for people who are younger in their career journey is being the one to take initiative on something like this where clearly companies are struggling and need help. Become the expert in house, and it's a wonderful opportunity for you to shine where other people may not be taking okay, so in closing, I would love for our listeners to be able to find you. You're doing such great work with women in automation, and so please let us know, where can we find you online?
Yeah, first and foremost, let me just say thank you so much for this conversation, Pallavi. It was such a joy. To anyone listening, you don't have to have all the answers. You just need to start thinking about asking the right questions, right? And AI isn't about being perfect, it's about being purposeful. So if you'd like to stay connected, you can find me on LinkedIn or check out our Women in Automation LinkedIn page or our website at womeninautomation.com and see how we're building a more inclusive future. And I'd love to work for you and hear from you and see, how we can make a difference in your organization as well.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Cassidy, for joining us. I'm so excited. And this is what I tell everybody. just get out there, meet people. You and I met face to face just last week, and now here you are on the podcast. And I know we're going to keep in touch and keep supporting each other. So there's a really wonderful group of people out there that are very enthusiastic about AI adoption, and they're making it a point to stay up to speed. So, the resources kind of are endless for you if you want to jump in. And the best part is, I feel like I'm meeting a lot of people such as yourself that are really genuine and in their willingness to want to help each other. And so that to me has been like the best part of this AI journey is again meeting the humans that are involved with AI implementation and transformation. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Cassidy, once again, thank you. Please don't forget to subscribe and comment. Always love to hear comments from you so we can address them and perhaps they become topics for a future show. If you're looking for help on AI-driven growth, you can reach out to me. My agency is Wit Omni AI Marketing, and I work with business leaders and growth stage companies to help them go really fast with their growth using AI. So once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you back here soon. Take care.